Matthew chapter number 6. Boy, if there's ever a passage in the Bible that will examine you and check your heart, it is this passage. Matthew chapter 6, going through the book of Matthew on Sunday morning, verse number 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he'll hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now when you read that passage, you immediately know it has something to do with money. And some preachers, when they preach on money, they try to sneak up on you, try to kind of ease into the subject and before you even know what's hitting you. And I've never been real good at that. I just say, hey, here it is. You do what you want to with it kind of approach. Very aware that I preached on money just a few weeks ago when we were at the beginning of chapter 6 where Jesus is talking about giving but not giving as the hypocrites, giving without hypocrisy. And we took occasion there to talk about money because that's where it was. And if you think that around here we talk too much about money, we only talk about it when the Bible talks about it. And I thought, if this passage was about how wonderful you are, that's what we'd preach about, but that's not what it's about. And I thought to encourage you that the book of Matthew, Jesus talks about money over 100 times just in Matthew. And I thought, boy, that's wonderful, wonderful. The truth is we all like to talk about money, don't we? And the reason why is because we live in a culture that is consumed with consuming. And Jesus said that a man's life consists not of the things which he possesses, but boy, you'd hardly know that living in America. We live in a culture that is rich. We are obsessed with things far more than most of the rest of the world. And most of the world doesn't live for things because they don't have things. But so much of our lives is identified with the things that we have. In fact, somebody wrote this, we live in a big house that is filled with things. And when we leave church, we're all going to get in a very expensive thing parked out there in the yard. And we're going to go home and sit down in a leather thing and turn a thing on to entertain you. Sitting in the yard or the garage are things to swim in, things to ride on, things to play with, things to work with, things that are there just to look at. You have things to sit on and things to sit at, things to cook with and things to eat from, things to clean, things to amuse you, things to watch, things to listen to. You have things with 2 wheels, things with 4 wheels, things to put on top of the things with 4 wheels, things to pull behind the things with 4 wheels. And most people will sit in their house filled with expensive things and think about adding more things to their things. Some will sit in their castle of things unhappy because of something they've not been able to add to their collection of things. And we never realize that things get in the way of our living for God. Sometimes we have so many things that we gather up some of our things and take them to the secondhand thing store to make room for more things. But when you die, they're going to put only one thing in that box. You. That's it. So Jesus has something to say about you and your things. That's what this passage is about. Now remember the context. This entire Sermon on the Mount, Jesus has been exposing the low living of the Pharisees, the religious hypocrite. The Pharisees are all about rules and traditions and regulations and all about the externals. They did the absolute minimum required. As long as you kept up the appearances and as long as you towed the line and kept every rule, that it didn't matter what went on in the heart. Their religion was all on the outside. And all that did was turn them into spiritual hypocrites. I really believe that the key to the Sermon on the Mount is back in chapter 5 and verse 20. If you'll look at it, where Jesus said that I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no wise case enter into the kingdom of heaven. It's not that your righteousness that you have to be doing more things than them, but your righteousness has to be deeper than their righteousness. And if you'll back up to chapter 5 and verse 1, you have all of those Beatitudes, and I believe that what Jesus is saying is that you have to keep a right relationship with yourself, broken in spirit and mourning over sin and hungering after righteousness. So in verse 1 through 12, you have to have a right relationship with yourself. Look in verse number 13 down to verse number 16. Look at those verses. And he's talking about being salt and light in the world. You must have a right relationship to the world. Not a part of it, but a light to it. If you'll look in verse 17, 18, and 19, he's talking about the Word of God and the law of God not failing. And so you have to have a right relationship to the Word. When you get all the way to chapter 6 and verse 1 through 18, we've dealt with these verses about giving and praying and fasting for the right motive. You have to have a right relationship in worship. And now in verse number 19, you have to have a right relationship with possessions. And we've seen through all of this Sermon on the Mount that Jesus has directed His marks directly to the Pharisees that are in that crowd. That they are hypocrites that did everything for a show. Their religion is skin deep. It never touched the heart. And now when He deals with possessions, I believe that He's preaching right at them. Because the Pharisees of old really were no different than the Pharisees of now. It has always been that hypocritical, false religion has always been accompanied by greed. Always. You turn on TBN and watch the latest charlatan on TV, and it's always accompanied by greed. That's why in 1 Peter 5 there's a warning given to the preacher, and the warning is to feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint but willingly, not of filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. And I believe the warning is given to the minister because filthy lucre can be such a temptation. And whenever you have a false teacher, you will have either immorality or you will have greed and covetousness. You remember Eli in the Old Testament, the high priest? And do you remember how he had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas? They were immoral, they were greedy. And how they were taking the very best of the offering and they were keeping it for themselves and giving the rest to the Lord. Greed, covetous. False prophets always accompanied by greed and covetousness. And so it was in Jesus' day. In Luke 16, Jesus said, the Pharisees who are covetous, that they're pilfering the system and they're getting rich off religion. They had the mindset that blessings, that wealth was a sign of blessing, that they were rich because they were so righteous. So to go along with their hypocrisy, they're greedy for material wealth and material things. And so Jesus addresses that. He's talking about greed and covetousness and money and things. But He's also talking about the heart, because that's where it all begins. Your relationship or your attitude toward things is just an indicator of what is in your heart. Show me your checkbook and I'll show you what is in your heart. That's the thrust of the passage. Here's how the passage is laid out. Look at it. In the text there are three choices. In verse 19, 20, and 21, you can either lay up treasures on earth or you can lay up treasures in heaven. In verse 22 and verse 23, you can either be full of light or you can be full of darkness. In verse 24, you can either serve God or mammon. So the passage is about money and things, but the passage is not about money and things. The passage is about your heart. And material possessions and wealth is just one of many indicators of what is in your heart. Now, isn't that encouraging? Isn't that a blessing? Huh? Somebody help me this morning. Isn't that a blessing? Say amen. Amen. So the three questions that are answered. Look, if you would, in verse number 19. Here's the first question that is answered. Where is your treasure? Look at verse 19. Lay it not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now, here's the first question that we have to address, and let's get it out of the way. Does this mean that you should not lay aside anything on earth? There are some people who would read this and they would say, well, it's wrong to have a savings account. It's wrong to have retirement or life insurance or an emergency fund. Some would even take it that we're not to have any possessions at all. And so what we're supposed to do is we take a vow of poverty and we completely disavow ourselves of any possessions at all. After all, Jesus told the rich young ruler, He says, sell all that you have and give it all to the poor. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do this morning. Of course, I remind you that the only person that He told that to was that rich young ruler. He never told Mary and Martha to do that. And the reason why He told that rich young man to do that is because his possessions were keeping him from God. So I say right off the bat that the Bible is not against you owning anything. In fact, the Bible tells you how to acquire wealth and how to save and how to have the blessings of God, even in material things. Deuteronomy 8 and verse 18, thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is He that giveth thee power to get wealth. That's our God. 1 Timothy 6 and verse 16, charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, watch this, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. Hey, I want you to know my God's a generous God. He's been generous to me. He's given me more than I need. He's given me more than I deserve, and most times more than I want. God's been generous to me. And the Bible has a lot to say about how to make money, how to save money, how to spend money, how to manage money. Proverbs 14 and verse 23. Boy, here's a great verse for every young man. Proverbs 14:23. In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. You want my paraphrase? If you want to be rich, work. If you want to be poor, talk. That's what the verses say. Proverbs 21 and verse 20. There is treasure to be desired, oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. Proverbs 24 and verse 4. By knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. A wise man knows how to build a house and fill it with precious and pleasant riches. Proverbs 28 and verse 19. He that tilleth his land shall have plenty of bread, but he that followeth after vain persons shall have poverty enough. You can get up tomorrow and go to work, or you can chase a get-rich-quick scheme. And you'd be better go get you a job and make you a paycheck than just chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's what the Bible is saying. So I say to you this morning that the Bible is not against you owning things. The Bible is not even against you setting something aside for the future. The Proverbs talks about going to the ant and learning something from the ant, how that the ant works in the summer and prepares for the winter. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But what Jesus is talking about is your attitude toward these things. It's right to provide for the family, and it's right to plan for the future. It's right to make wise investments, but it's wrong to waste money. It's wrong to be greedy. It's wrong to be tight-fisted. Somebody help me this morning. Well, I feel like I hit a stump already. Hadn't even got to started preaching yet. It's all about your heart. Now here's what Jesus says. Break it down. Verse number 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth. Now you can divide everything that you have into two piles. Necessities and luxuries. Things that you need, things that you don't need. Would you agree with that? I mean, you have your bills and you have your groceries and you have your clothing, you have shelter, you have transportation. Are you with me? Then you have your gym membership and cable TV. And 50-inch color television. Are you with me? All right? You have things that you need, and there are things that you don't need. And people get in trouble when they spend so much of their time and energy on this want pile over here. Here's the thrust of the exhortation. Don't spend all of your money. Don't spend your life on just these things that you want. Don't be so earth bound. Don't put all of your treasure upon the earth. Now, I don't think that anybody's going to go all radical on us this morning and get real fanatical and start selling everything off and get just to absolute necessity of life. I just don't think anybody's going to. However, some of you have such a lust for things. Shinier things, better things, bigger things, more expensive things. And that's the reason why you're up to your eyeballs in debt. That's the reason why you can't give to missions, because all of your treasure is in the garage and out there in the shed, and all of your treasure is there. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon. Or are you just preaching this just because we got mission conference coming along? No, I'm preaching it because that's where I'm at this morning. That's where I'm at. I know somebody get all offended, but hey, let's talk about it. Let's just have a little family chat here, shall we? Listen, there's Christians with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, and the work of God struggles just to meet needs. And you could be a huge blessing to the church, or a huge blessing to some poor widow, or somebody that's really in need. And you have the ability to change somebody's life, but you're tight-fisted, and it's not about what you have. It's about what you do with what you have. Listen, there's always something. Oh, my word, in the morning. I might as well just go ahead and do it this morning, shall I not? There's always people in the church, and I'm just talking about Victory Baptist Church this morning, just the members of Victory Baptist Church. There's always some people in the church that will never give a dime, period. You're not going to tithe, you're not going to give to missions, you're not going to give to special offerings. We accept that. Y'all come on anyway. There's just some people like that. There are some people who are going to give what's required and not a penny more. You got your tithe down to $64.83, and it is letter of the law. And then there are some people just give and give and give and give. And by the way, if you're hung up on money and things, Jesus has two words for you. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth. Live to give for others. Family, church, missions, the poor. But not for yourselves. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. Now, the standard commentary on that right there is that Middle Eastern people kept their wealth in commodities. They didn't have $100 bills and banknotes and all, so they kept it in commodities. And what really spoke of wealth was three things: garments, grain, and gold. So, moths, that attacks garments. And by the way, moths they never eat the garments that you wear. Right? Only the garments that are stored. Anyway. So moths, that attacks the garments. So there's the danger of keeping all of your wealth in garments. And then thieves, they'll break in and steal the gold. So there's the danger in keeping all of your wealth in gold. But it said where moth and rust doth corrupt. Now I'm going to tell you what the standard Bible commentary from the standard Bible corrector is, all right? Because we've got to keep with this garment, grain, gold thing. So what the standard Bible corrector does with rust is he says, well, the Greek word for rust is actually vermin. So it's not actually rust, it's mice. And mice gets in and gets your grain. And that helps us stay with the gold grain garment. Moth, rust, and thieves. And I was with them until they turned rust into mice. I'm not seeing rusty mice. I'm just not catching it. And to be honest with you, I honestly don't know what rust would attack in that day, but it's a real stretch for me to turn that into rats, because it fits that garments, grain, gold dilly. The word rust not found anywhere else in the Bible, so that's not helping me a whole lot. But here's the point, is don't put all of your treasure in things that are temporal. Howard Hughes, one of the wealthiest men in his day. The day before he died, Howard Hughes was worth $2 billion. The day he died is worth zero. and took none of it with him. $2 billion. When he died, his funeral was attended by 16 people. Lasted 8 minutes. Went from 2 billion to 0 in 24 hours. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth. Look in verse 20. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Send it ahead. The more that I send ahead in the glory, the greater glory when I get there, the greater the investment, the greater the reward. Somehow, when I invest my money in the ministry and the work of the Lord, somehow that's determinative of what I will have. I don't have it all figured out. I don't have to understand everything. I just have to believe it. Somebody said, preacher, do you really believe it? Oh, I do. Luke 12 and verse 33, sell all that you have and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not. Luke 16 and verse 9, I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. Isn't that great? Make friends with your money who will receive you into everlasting habit. I believe with all of my heart. I believe that you can give to missions and somebody gets saved as a result of it. And one day when you get to glory, somebody's going to shake your hand and say it was because you gave to missions that I'm here. And so thank you for giving to the Lord. You say, I don't believe that. Then you tell me what it means. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Look at verse 21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You cannot have your treasure in heaven and earth at the same time. You are either earthly minded or heavenly minded. You are either enthralled with the material or spiritual. You are either right now offended or you are delighted. Amen. We've been out here on this parking lot working, and Brother Vince and I, and whoever helping for the day. And you know what Pokemon Go is? Pokemon Go, I guess, I don't know who puts them where, but there is a Pokemon Go at our church. Did you know that? It's right out there by that sign. So I don't know what you do with him. I don't know what you do with, I don't know if you kill him when you get him or you eat him. I don't know what you do with the thing, all right? But there's a Pokemon Go out there, and Brother Vince, all day long, we're watching people pull up in nice, shiny cars, and they're pulling up to the sign, and they're stopping there for a little bit. And they're getting their Pokemon, and they're going on. All day long. There'll be 10 people a day. Pull it up. I'm talking about adults. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about 7-year-olds. I'm talking about adults. I want to put a sign out there. That says, get Jesus, not Pokemon. And I tell you that we've got people sitting in our churches and you're living for things that are about as valuable as Pokemon. Aaron Francis preached Wednesday night, did a tremendous job. I sat there back there in the back and thrilled my heart. Set your affection on things above and not on things on the earth. And what you do with your money says where your heart is. Where's your treasure? Where's your treasure? Look at verse 22. Where's your treasure? What is your focus? Verse 22. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. If thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? It may take you a minute to see it, but I believe Jesus is talking about the same subject using a different illustration. When material wealth is the focus of your life, your vision gets distorted. When the things that you see are more valuable than the things that you don't see, your focus is off. If you have a dirty window in your house, then it hinders the light from coming in or allowing you to see out clearly. And the eye is the window that lets light into the soul. It's the window of the body. And the light that comes into your heart and depends into your soul, it depends on what you're looking at. And I believe the illustration is that a focus on the material hinders the light of the spiritual. I'm not saying that you can't have money and be spiritual, but I am saying that you can't be so worried and lustful about money and be spiritual. Because it clouds the vision. You won't see things like you should see. You see, here's the text. Where you put your treasure is, where you put your treasure, that's where your heart is. And if your heart is fixed on heaven, then you'll put your treasure in heaven. Support missions and give to the board, ministries, and all of that. And if you have that generous spirit, it's like a clean window that lets light and spiritual truth into your soul. And your eyes, because they are set upon heaven, will open you up to spiritual perception and spiritual understanding. But if you're covetous and you're tight-fisted and you're always thinking about another thing that you want and hoarding your money, and you always got your mind set on things on the earth, it will blind you to spiritual truth. You have two eyes, but you can only look at one thing. You cannot focus on earth and heaven at the same time. And some of you trying to be secular and spiritual. You're secular 6 days a week and you try to be spiritual 1 day a week and it's not working for you. Some of you come to church and it is nothing more than a religious duty and you have to drag yourself here and you hope for an excuse not to have to come back. And some of you wake up, you think about material things. When you go to bed, you're thinking about material things and your whole life is wrapped up in you and you never have a spiritual thought in your body. I woke up this morning at I either wake up thinking about breakfast or a song. This morning I woke up thinking, Master, the tempest is raging. You know how hard it is to go back to sleep with that in your mind? Some of you wake up and you go to bed and every waking moment and you wouldn't give to missions and you wouldn't make a sacrifice and you wouldn't sell some stuff and give it away. And there is spiritual truth out there and it's life transforming and it always goes over top of your head. You never see it because the window of the soul is dirty. You have a dirty eye that only sees the world around you. You never look up to see the heaven above you. So where is your treasure? What is your focus? Verse 24, who are you serving? No man can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he'll hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You know, whenever you preach on money, somebody will always reject it. I understand that. And maybe this morning you sit here as a church member and you listen to this and you know what God expects of you. You know the Bible principles of stewardship and giving, and you know the Lord would have you to be a generous person. But you also got your eye on that new toy. You're the kind of person you would never have enough. And you got your financial plan all laid out, and this would put a real crimp in it. And so somebody walks out and they completely dismiss the sermon. You've got your reasons, you've got your justifications, you're not going to change. Because you see there's two masters. And you can't serve both. You cannot serve God and mammon. And if money is your master, then you won't serve God. But if you love the Lord with all of your heart, then giving is the most natural response of that. And by the way, these two masters are completely different. These two masters will lead you to lead two different lives. One will command you to walk by faith, one to walk by sight. One master will satisfy you, one will never satisfy you. One master will call you to be humble, one will call you to be proud. One master will call you to trust God for your need, one will call you to worry about everything. I've noticed something about Paisley. I don't know if I've told you, I'm a grandpa. Paisley came into the world with clenched fists. They call it the Palmer grasp effect. Every baby is born with clenched fists because that's how they are in the womb. And it takes some weeks before they open that fist and reach things and grab things. But every person born is born with clenched fists. And some people die having never opened their hands. If you lay all of your treasures upon earth, you have a misplaced heart. If your eye is single and all your focus is on the material, you have a misdirected mind. If you serve mammon over God, you have a misaligned will. There's a young man raised in Oregon. His name was Jim Elliott. Jim Elliott got saved, surrendered to go to the mission field. Got married, was going to Ecuador to the Auca Indians, where no missionary had ever gone before. He and along with 4 other missionary families went to Ecuador together. They made contact with one Indian and thought they had made friends with that Indian, and they thought they could get into the jungle and make contact with the tribe. Flew in as far as they could, took a boat down the river as far as they could, and they reached the tribe that they were trying to reach, these 5 young men. Jim Elliot was 22, and 10 Indians came out and murdered them there in the river. And while you may think that's a waste, Jim Elliot wrote in his diary, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." And one day Jim Elliot will stand at the judgment next to some Christian who paid lip service to God, served mammon, and made sure life was comfortable. David Livingstone was a pioneer missionary to Africa. Come. When he went to Africa, everybody thought he was mad. By the time he died, he was a hero. Livingstone spent his life in missions. Livingstone said, "I will place no value on anything I possess except in relation to the kingdom of Christ. If anything will advance the interests of that kingdom, it should be given away." Spent his life, pioneer missionary in Africa, died on his knees in Africa. But because by the time that he died, he was a Christian celebrity in England, where he came from. England wanted to bring him back to England to bury him. The Indians said no. His heart's in Africa, he ought to be buried here. But they came from England, they got his body, they put it in a coffin, they put it in a ship, get ready to bring it back to England for a hero's burial. And the night before the ship sailed, some Indians broke into the hold. They opened up the box that had his body. And they took a dagger, and they drove it in his chest, and they cut his heart out. Today, the body of David Livingstone lies in Westminster Abbey. Well, there's a little village in Africa underneath a tree. There's a sign that says at the bottom of this tree lies the heart of David Livingstone. Bury my heart on the mission field. So I ask you this morning, where is your heart? Which world are you living for? Where's your treasure? What are you focused on? Who are you serving? Heads bowed, eyes closed. And I play for us, Jacob. I want you to find the last song that we sang as you're all on the altar. Christian, would you come this morning to this altar and say, God, I want to give my life to you, my heart to you. Not lip service. Not lip service. Take the most precious things, the dearest things. Oh, I hope you understand this morning. It's not money. It's an illustration of what's in your heart. Would you come? I wish that every young person in our church would surrender their life to missions, full-time service, whether God calls you or not. Go ahead and surrender. Go ahead and be a volunteer. Go ahead, make yourself available. Would you come?